And we have a story right here. This is from today, actually. New York Times urges no prior restraint against Veritas coverage. Basically saying Veritas' claims do not implicate the kind of extraordinary public harms, such as national security, that American courts have suggested. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about the argument. Here, let's get a little bit hypothetical then. My question is, you've got person A suing person B. Person B illegally obtains person A's communications with their lawyer as it pertains to this lawsuit. How could a judge how could a judge handle that case? I mean, he's got to throw it out.
It's just it's straight up privilege. But here's the thing, right? Unfortunately, it's happened before. When Bob Mueller was U.S. Attorney in Massachusetts, he actually had a criminal case where he surveilled a client and their attorney's conversation and utilized it in the prosecution. Came back to bite him in the butt. In one of the biggest narco trafficking cases out of Florida. Wow. Same thing. The U.S. Attorney's Office obtained the communications between the defendant and his lawyer and didn't disclose it. Now, in those criminal cases, it's a little different, right? There's a harsher penalty because due process is at stake, but the rule of law is the same. It's a privileged communication. All you need to ask New York Times is, if they're okay with this, then what Project Veritas should do is be like, fine, give us all of New York Times' privileged communications.
Oh, and the judge could be like, yes.
Yeah. And release it to the general public and make everyone see it. I mean, that's what the New York Times is doing.
Why not?
Vanity Fair. Yeah, go ahead.
Then we just see all the emails where they're like, don't cover Epstein.
Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah. Like, that story, we gotta make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Just like, of course, CBS News, like which Project Veritas exposed, was hiding a huge expose, which they had, according to one of their reporters, they had
you think I'm joking?
Clinton and other presidents on. So, again, they were covering that story. But Vanity Fair had a very interesting take on this because, again, it's all about framing. And the way that these people just frame stuff is just so disingenuous. They had an article that was titled "Press Freedom Advocates Alarmed That Project Veritas Just Muzzled the New York Times." That's their understanding of the situation. And again, it's so mind-boggling to see this kind of like twisting and turning and manipulation of basic facts to push a narrative and an agenda.
Here's the only good thing that comes of this. If, like you were saying earlier, lawyers are expensive, these suits are expensive, but when you bring them and they're credible, they take 1 to 2 years. At the end of it, you actually get some really good rulings on what we call case law precedent if these cases survive. But what these guys try to do is drown them out. Like Veritas isn't going anywhere, right?
Right.
These guys are actually, if I was the Times' lawyers, I'd be like, you need to sit down and shut up because we might squeak out of this case, but you are going to mess up the future of defamation for defendants if you keep down this track because the judge will force. He might not issue now or in a month or 6 months, but in a year, he's going to have to make some rulings, and those rulings will likely get appealed and then affirmed, and then it's law.
Well, are judges obligated to stick to case law? Like if someone says in the case of...
supposed to.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
They're supposed to follow binding authority, and the idea is that they'll get reversed. And as Cash said earlier, if they get reversed, that's the worst thing a judge wants to do. There's not much practical effect for lifetime federal judges, but New York State judges aren't lifetime appointees, and so there could be real effects for them. But imagine just rolling it back. If this stands, if what New York Times is doing stands, what's to stop any news publication who ever gets sued from just illegally obtaining the privileged communications of their opponents and publishing and shaming them? That's why this judge has to go ahead and issue the order. And if New York Times doesn't like it, take it to the Supreme Court. Go ahead, appeal it up to the New York Court of Appeals, and then appeal it to the United States Supreme Court. Call it a First Amendment issue, freedom of the press if you want, and let them determine it. Because then, if we get that case law in the books, okay, fine. But at the end of the day, judges do have some limited ability to issue a gag order when there is sufficient justification. And I can't imagine how illegally obtaining your opponent's privileged communications and then trying to publish those privileged communications to shame them would not meet strict scrutiny.
Maybe I'll get my lawyer in my defamation case against the Times to file for the Times' privileged communications and then send them out.
And what's the Times' argument going to be? They're going to be like, well, we previously argued
I'm going to cite this.
Right. Like, here's an article from the New York Times.
Yeah.